Hello and welcome back to the Millennial and the Mom. I'm Maddie, the Millennial.
And I'm Katie, the mom.
And while we're recording this a little bit off schedule, but we just this past Wednesday released the first couple episodes of the podcast. So we're super excited that it's actually live and people are maybe finding us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Probably not yet, but
Oh my
we're
gosh,
having
no,
fun.
I've actually had a couple people have messaged me and they've listened to it, and I am so excited. Mostly Maddie, I just want to say for everybody listening, I am so impressed that you figured out all the logistics, not only how to edit the episodes and add music, I'm very impressed with that, but also how to get the podcast to all these places. So it's all you, Maddie, and I'm just a proud mom over here.
No, it was a lot of YouTube video watching. I really wanted to make for our Instagram and TikTok little videos about the because we're doing this on Zoom. I wanted to make the little videos and I literally probably spent 2 hours watching various YouTube videos about how to turn a Zoom recording into a format that works for Instagram. So it's been definitely a learning experience. It's been really fun for the most part. It started to get a little bit stressful right before because I was like, okay, we actually have to get this out. And it took a lot. It was more involved than I think we both thought. I think we just thought oh, we hit submit and then the podcast hosting website will get it out everywhere. But it was
Well,
a
but
little more.
remember, I kept refreshing it trying to find it, but then there was
I know
one more step you didn't know about. And I was like, I don't see it anywhere.
I was so stressed. I was like, I did everything right. And then I realized you had to hit finish or something. And I forgot to hit it. So, well, hopefully, if you're listening to this episode also got pushed out. But we're really excited. We have so many more topics to record. But this week, Mom, I mean, we're celebrating a major milestone for you and Dad. We're going to talk all about your 30th anniversary trip to Europe.
Oh my gosh, I cannot believe we've been married for 30 years. That seems like, on the one hand, hardly any time has passed. It feels like it's just been so quick. On the other hand, I mean, 30 years is a big number. I've spent my entire adult life. I mean, I met him when I was 21, my entire adult life, and more than half my life married to him. So I'm very lucky. I'm grateful. He's
Is that your little
amazing.
plug that you're less than 60? You've
Yes, I am. Do I have to plug it or should I? I
No,
mean,
you're just
I'm
such a
definitely
spring
under
chicken.
60. I would say I'm much closer to 50 than I am 60. So let's not speed it along any more than we have to. But I'm not someone who cares about aging. I mean, listen,
No.
I got some gray hairs and I'm not coloring them, and that's a whole nother episode. Talk about that later.
But no,
But
I
yeah,
mean it makes sense. You have three kids in their mid through late 20s. So I mean at some point, you have to have been with Dad for at least 28 years, which is my older sister's age. But no, I think we were so happy that you guys actually not that we didn't, expect you to do something, but that you planned a big trip, that you went and you celebrated. You guys are not, I was gonna say low key, but you guys really aren't low key. But sometimes I feel you have you guys deserve to do a big trip and celebrate your anniversary and all of that. We can get into later if you have any advice for us newlyweds. I mean, you've been married 30 years. I've been married for 8 months, which maybe to Drew feels like it's been 30 years, but
hey, it's a day at a time, a day at a
oh,
time.
I can see over 30 years why you have to take it day by day. But yeah, I like today we're just gonna get, into your trip and how you planned it. You guys were gone for a long time.
Yeah, we were going actually 18 days, only 17 hotel nights because there was one overnight, obviously flight getting over there. I will say before we start, the funniest thing was you and your sisters were totally the parent mode. You're you're not sending enough text messages. You're not telling us enough what's going on, and I'm like, you guys held it together back here because with the
Well,
time change, it was hard to keep in touch.
Well, and I feel we're still, it's that reel I've seen on Instagram where it's me, a 27-year-old adult, texting my parents that I'm on the plane and we're about to take off or whatever. We are a family that it doesn't matter who's going where, if it's a trip with for work or with our significant others or friends, we always will text on plane or hitting the road if we're going on a
Yeah.
road trip. And you guys are always tracking us, or not tracking us, but like you're like want to know what's up, and then like you guys went like radio silent. I was like, what country are they in? Like,
We didn't
are
do that on purpose.
they like?
We didn't do it on purpose. I was worried with the time change of like texting you or something, and like it would be like the middle of the night for you. But I don't know why I worried about
I
it
mean, I
because
wouldn't have replied, but I
I
would have seen
know,
it
I
when you
know.
wake up.
I know, but I did reply to some texts that you guys sent that ended up hitting me in the middle of the night. Not that they were specifically for me, but because I wasn't sleeping or something and I was up, so I replied to it. But no, we really, I mean, getting a little bit into the planning for it, we've not. I mean, we've done some amazing travel in our lifetimes, and of course, your dad has done an amazing amount of travel for work, so he's been a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
We've never done like anything really quote unquote big for our anniversary, right? We've always had some other things go. I mean, last summer, two people got married and we had, some other things
Yeah.
interfering with anniversaries in the past. So this was the first time we planned so far in advance, which actually is very ironic when we talk a little bit about planning process. We're not a family that plans things very far in advance. We'll be like,
No.
a
And
month.
I will say, as someone who has recently gotten married, like Drew comes from a family that like if they take a trip, like they know far in advance, they plan in advance, like mainly because like you mentioned, like dad has done so much travel for work. Like he spent 30 years as a management consultant. So like all he did was like pack up and go at the last minute, get on a plane, go to wherever he needed to go. And that was just how we travel as a family. It's like, oh, last minute, like we're going to, Chicago, or let's go visit Meredith in California. And, it's always super last minute. We're just booking last minute flights. And a lot of times it's because like dad had so many miles. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, it mattered that the price had gone up because we're using mileage tickets or whatever. So like, that's been a huge adjustment for like Drew and I, is like, he wants to plan things far in advance. I'm like, no, you just don't understand. Like, I don't know how to do that. And then you guys plan this like 6 months in advance, which was so uncharacteristic.
It was so uncharacteristic that we planned it so far in advance. And the funny part of it is we booked the tickets. I think it was more than 6 months. I think it was maybe like 8 months prior to the trip, which normally we wouldn't do it that far out. Of course, to go to Europe, you got to have a little bit of planning, but so we planned 8 months in advance. We booked these tickets, we booked the hotels, we get the major things locked in. And then like 3 weeks before the trip, the airline cancels our original ticket to Europe. And we have to rebook. I mean, I was like, this is why I don't plan in advance, because now they're like, oh, we canceled this one, leg of your flight. So now you have to like rebook everything, which was fine. Of course, we got the price we originally paid and we rebooked on a new route. But that actually kind of set off. We did not have a good first, like, let's say 24 hours of the trip, because we ended up connecting to go there. That's a whole nother debate. And I mean, if we had your dad on this podcast, he'd have a lot to say. We really never, ever want to book a connection. However, for price reasons, we booked a connection going. We were originally supposed to go through Heathrow and on to Paris, because the price to go nonstop was really, really expensive. So we're like, okay, it's fine. We can connect. Like we're not on any time constraint here. So when we had to rebook the flight because they canceled
you're like, forget. Well, okay, I guess there were 2 rebookings, because you rebooked a couple of weeks in advance, but then when you got there, like to check in for your flight, you had to get rebooked.
Right. So we originally did the rebook. So they changed us from going to Heathrow to Paris.
Which happens. That happened on our honeymoon. We booked like 6 months in advance and they ended up canceling that flight. So we had to get on a different one. But we knew at least a month in advance.
We knew a couple weeks in advance. Then we have to go to Chicago, and then we're going to go Chicago nonstop to Paris. Actually, it was going to be a better routing anyways, until we got to the airport. And at first, the flight to Chicago was running a little bit behind. It was already a tight connection that we kind of were wondering why they only gave us like a little over an hour in Chicago to change planes. Not a big deal. I mean, but so anyways, long story short, the Chicago flight kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And we had checked in, and then it became apparent we weren't going to make the connection. And the problem, as you know, with the Europe flights, is it's not like I'm going to get a later flight. I got to wait a whole nother 24 hours.
Yeah.
So then we're trying to rebook, but we'd already checked our luggage. We'll talk about checked luggage in a minute. But anyways, I'm not going to get into all the details. We ended up spending, I think, 4 or 5 hours at the Dallas airport before we even left. And we finally left on a flight to Heathrow, which oddly enough, we got upgraded to first class, not just business class, but first class.
Okay.
I know, which I mean, again, was
well,
great.
I think I mean, I have had the luxury of getting many upgrades in my life thanks to dad's airline status, but I still don't know what was the difference. You had booked,
Okay,
you were supposed to be in a pod regardless.
Right. I mean, it's kind of it. Listen, I'm gonna little tip. Don't ever pay for a first class ticket if you. I mean, I'm all about business class on a long flight. Listen, I'm old.
But
I gotta
isn't
be able
that
to.
first class? Like if I'm
No,
flying New York
no. It's
to San
different.
Francisco, there's only one section that has pods in
No,
it.
that's not true. There's four. This was what they call a 4-class flight. It was first class, business class, premium economy, or something like that, and then
where Drew and I sit, which is like row 45, because he won't even let us pay for a seat.
So listen, what I'm saying is I've rarely been on a flight like this, but the first class seats, there was only 8 of them on this flight. And then there was like a business class section, which is where we thought we were going to be. But
and then anyways, all the peasants in the back of the plane.
They rerouted us. So she's like, no, I'm going to put you in these first class seats. These are the 2 we have available. I'm like, this is great. So
okay, well, let's take a step back. So obviously, again, podcast coming from a place of privilege, but before we get into all of this, like, what was your guys' itinerary? Like so you're going from Dallas to Paris, and then let's walk through like where all you were planning to go.
We started in Paris, and I have been, as you know, because you were with me, I went to Paris for the day one time. You and I were in London on a crazy trip. Talk about that another time. And we took the Channel to Paris and we spent the day there.
Which was so fun.
It was so fun. And then we went back. So I had kind of had this breeze through Paris. Like we went in the Louvre, we saw the Eiffel Tower, we went to Champs-Elysees, and then we
were literally just checking the boxes.
We literally
saw the Eiffel Tower. Next
stop. And Dad has never been to Paris other than to connect. So we wanted to start in Paris. And honestly, like I don't have a ton of experience traveling in Europe. Dad's been to a bunch of places for business, but it's not like we've taken all these European vacations and I'm like, oh, let's go somewhere like unique, because I haven't even been to the major places. So, of course I wanted to kind of we wanted to be in Paris together, like do the, kind of the big things. So we started in Paris. Then we were looking for another city to go to. When we kind of debated about where to go, we really thought about going to like the Amalfi Coast and down to like Rome and southern Italy. I'm going to be honest, it's just too crowded in the summer to do that. I was going to say a lot of Europe was already crowded, but
you guys don't like crowds.
I didn't feel like I needed a beach vacation in Europe at this particular time. If I was going to do that, I would try to go a little more off season, like maybe May or September or whatever. But so we were looking for another city to go to. And honestly, it just happened to be that we had some points that we could use in Vienna, Austria, at this like really nice historic hotel. So, I mean, for Dad and I, it's not like we've been to all these places. So I'm like, why do I care if I'm in Vienna or Frankfurt or Amsterdam? Like I haven't been to any of these places. So
Has Dad been to Austria before?
No, neither of us had been. Okay. So then we did 5 days in Vienna. Well, it actually ended up being 4 because we extended Paris a little bit because our trip got started kind of late with all the delays. And then after that, we went to Lake Como, Italy, which we'll talk about. Then we did 1 night in Milan because we were flying out the next morning to go to Dublin. We ended our trip in Dublin, but that was to see a friend. So that one, we didn't do a lot of planning. We got to connect with a really good college friend, actually best man in our wedding, friend of Dad. So that was really fun. So we ended the trip there and then we came back. So it was 17 nights total, the 18th night being that first night on the overnight flight. But it was great. I mean, I think that, everybody has like a travel personality. I mean, and what
is your travel personality? As someone who's traveled with you a lot, I don't know if I know what you're going to say.
Okay. This is what I want to say at the outset. I admire people who can like get every, budget friendly thing and see a million sites and like check a million things off their list and like pack in a single carry-on bag. Like hats off to you.
Katie.
No. I like to be a little more immersive. Like of course I wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. I wanted to see a few big things. I don't need to check things off a list. I just want to like be in Paris
What
and be
does that
like,
have to do with you needing to check luggage?
no, these are
You
parts
be
of my
immersive.
personality.
Oh,
Parts of
okay.
my personality. Okay. So it's like, I just want to like be an experience. I don't care that I know I can guarantee you every person who's gone to Europe has done more things than I did on this trip. We did not like pack our days. We enjoyed ourselves. We relaxed. We kind of like thought about what we wanted to do, what we were feeling that day.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then in terms of luggage, okay, luggage is a very personal thing. And people love to carry on. I love to carry on. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, on a 17, 18-day trip, it absolutely does not work for me because as you know, I have some medical needs. I do have a significant amount of medical things I have to bring with me. That's just the reality. And
Mm-hmm.
I really, it does take up, some amount of space. So to be
No,
able to
I
do a
mean,
carry on
if you're
would have been
not,
hard.
yeah, I mean, if you're not going somewhere that has laundry or you don't feel confident in your, that what the laundry situation is going to be like, it is hard once you get past like 5 or 6 days. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard. I mean, it depends. Like if you're going somewhere warm and you're going on like a beach vacation, like you're going to be in your like bathing suit at the beach the whole time. Like
Right.
whatever, you only need a couple outfits you can recycle. But especially like if you're like Drew and I went to we did a quick like long weekend to Paris, which because we had a ton of airline miles and we were going to go somewhere warm. We were going to go from like New York area to Miami, which like I guess everyone in this area tries to do in the winter because it was going to be like $700 a person to fly to Miami from Newark. And we are like, where else can we go for, because it was like $700, but we had the points equivalent. So we're like, where else can we go? And it's like off season for Paris. And so we got all of our flights on miles and the hotel was like super cheap because it just wasn't full. But that was harder to like, we were only there for a long weekend, but it was winter. And so you have like
Yeah.
sweaters and like boots and coats. And like, we didn't need to check a bag, but I could see like if I was going back to Paris too, like you also want to be like it's a fashionable city. Like you want to
Okay.
be
Let's
wearing like
talk about that. Let's talk about
things.
that because I mean, anybody who knows me, I mean, I'm a pretty casual person. Like
Same.
I just I don't have like, all these fancy clothes. I don't like dress up on the regular. Like I like to get dressed up every now and then, but I'm kind of like basic wardrobe. Not that I don't have a lot of clothes. I have too many clothes, but they're all the
I
same
was gonna
basic
say
thing. They're the same basic thing.
your
Um,
closet is bigger than my bathroom.
yeah, it
So
is. Well, that's New York living versus suburban
no,
Dallas.
it's Hoboken living. I
Hoboken
know
living.
I got so much crap from both my sisters and Drew that I kept calling it the town I live in, and they were like, just say you live in Hoboken. So everyone, once again, I live
That
in
okay, wait a
Hoboken.
second. That is a side note. That's the biggest problem that we published 3 episodes because your two sisters have come in with the criticism. They have a lot
They
of
were like
feedback for us.
live texting us
Oh
as
my
they were
God. They
listening
were,
to
yeah,
it.
live. They were live texting as they were listening to it and commenting on it. It was pretty funny. We'll have them on at some point. But anyway, so I will say, and there's some really funny memes I've seen about this, but it's kind of like, me on a daily basis. I wear the same like black tank top, leggings, whatever.
Mhm.
Me packing for a European vacation. Of course, I need these stilettos and this like evening gown. So I suffered from that a little bit, right? I was really looking forward to this trip and I was just like imagining. And honestly, other than one dress I bought, I not bought that I brought, I wore everything I brought at least once. I mean, some stuff I wore lots and lots, many times. We
Yeah.
did send some laundry out, of course.
Was it warm? What was the climate?
Yes, it was warm. It wasn't hot though. It definitely wasn't hot. It was good. It was like 70s, 80s. We had a threat of rain almost the entire trip, but other than the last day, we
Not
really
a
didn't
threat
have
of
rain.
rain.
Yeah, well, it was
Why,
supposed to be
why did
raining
you
most days, but it
why did
didn't
you
end up
say it
raining.
like that? A threat of rain? Why didn't
Threat,
you just
threat.
no, I know, but I've never heard you use that expression before. You mean like it could rain? Like so what? And you just like was out the European say, oh no, there's a threat of rain.
I don't know
That was like
how
so
else.
bizarre. I've never
How else would I communicate that each day the
like
forecast
oh
said it was going to
it
rain, but it didn't rain?
it just there was a
Why
chance
is
of
this so
rain.
funny? There's a chance of showers.
Yeah, like a normal person, a threat of
Okay.
rain.
I
Okay, so it was warm. It wasn't hot. That's nice. So like what did you pack? Like what were your activities going to be? Like you obviously you knew you were going to go to the Eiffel Tower, you were going to go back to the Louvre.
Well, just so you know, we didn't go to the Eiffel Tower. We looked at the Eiffel Tower, but I didn't actually go to the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, I mean, when we were there in February or January,
it's like, there's the Eiffel Tower. It's pretty.
You couldn't go up in
light up at night and stuff. Well, the other thing too is I think anybody listening to this has to realize there's a couple of constraints we're operating in. Number one, we don't do boats. We don't do confined spaces, and we really don't do a lot of heights. So, I mean, that's going to rule out some things in Europe right there. Neither of us, neither your dad or I, me for claustrophobia reasons, him for more height reasons, we're not going to climb to the top of, something and look out. I mean, that's just not our thing.
Yeah.
We're not getting any small elevators. Actually, we had to get in a really small elevator once for this place we went to dinner. This place called Gigi's, and it had a beautiful view of the Eiffel Tower. And you had to line up, and everyone's lining up and checking in, and then you have to wait at these two elevators. It wasn't until we got way up in the line and we checked in for a reservation, and they told us like you either had to go left or right. And they're like, "Oh, go left." So I'm over there. And at that point, suddenly I see this sign on the wall that says maximum 4 people in the elevator. And part of me was like, oh, well, that's good. I'm glad. They're not going to pack people in here. And then when the elevator doors opened, I was like, I think 4 is about 5 too many people in that elevator. I mean, it was...
How many floors was it? Could you take the stairs?
No, it was, you probably could have somewhere, but it was probably about 4 or 5 floors, but this is the only option they gave you to get up there. And I mean, it was tight. We were in there with another couple, and all of us were like, I closed my eyes and I counted to 30, and I was like, please let this elevator ride be over because this is so small. But we did. We got up there, and then I thought
about you the other day because I was in my elevator in my office, and like I work in it. It's not like it's some like brand new skyscraper or whatever. It's more like an old office building. And I was taking the elevator and the lights went off.
Oh my God.
I mean, it kept going.
Just kill me.
But I was like, Mom would be freaking out.
I would be freaking out. So anyways, so I mean, what were we going to do? We were going to walk 1,000,000 miles during the day, right? And go around and see stuff. And then at night, we were going to go out, we like to go out for a nice dinner. We saw in Vienna, we went to the ballet and the opera. I have a lot to say about that.
What were your thoughts on those?
Okay, well, I think everybody should know, first of all, I've never uttered the words, I went to a ballet and I went to an opera until
This is the family that had to leave the San Francisco Nutcracker at Intermission. Because we discovered 10 years ago we weren't, performing arts people.
Okay, well, let me tell you something.
We were fine performing arts. Like, we'll go to a concert.
Yeah, I mean, at least the Nutcracker, I could tell what was going on. We were the ballet was not a hit. Okay, so also, we were in these seats. We're in the Vienna Opera House, which is unbelievable. It's absolutely amazing. But, you're online, like sitting here in America, booking these tickets. You don't have any idea what this venue is like. So we are not on the main floor of the Opera House, but up one level, which I thought from the map just looked like, like a mezzanine level. Well, it turns out the entire Opera House, which I guess I could have studied a little bit more, once you get above the first level, is all these like little boxes, right? Just kind of like what you would expect, old fashioned, like a little box with a curtain. But inside the box, they put like 9 chairs, like shoved.
Are there multiple levels within the box?
Yeah. Oh, not within the box, but then there's box after box after box level. They go way up. So we were in the first level up, and we were in the front seat, the front row of the box. There was like 3 rows. Okay. So the front row had, just imagine like a regular chair. And then there was 3 of them. And then the second row had like a little bit taller chair. And the third row had like a bar stool. And was
the bar stool cheaper than the other seats? Like, I'd be pretty bummed if I
in some ways the bar stool would have been the best seat. Okay, because the problem with the front row of this box was you're in this tiny chair, like shoved up against the front. You could barely move. And then the people behind you, the chairs weren't fixed to the ground. They were kind of like, movable.
You could move it.
And then behind you, though, you have 2 other people in chairs that are higher up, not quite a bar stool height. And then the last row, they probably had the most room. I mean, there are 3 rows. There's 2 rows in front of them, but they're still, it's still a good seat. I have no idea about ticket price. And I mean, listen, I was just trying to click and buy these tickets from afar. So that was a little bit challenging. It was extremely uncomfortable because we were like shoved into these two front seats. Like I couldn't even, and like my arm was like, couldn't even be like next to me. I had to have my arm like under my chin because on like the ledge of this thing. So that contributed to it. And then the ballet was like, again, I'm not very cultured. I was imagining like, some tutus and people jumping around, like kind of like Swan Lake-ish. No, 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 no. It was like,
What was it?
it was kind of like an interpretive ballet about nature and spring. And there was like
Was it like is it similar to like a Broadway show where you're going to Broadway, but there's a bunch of different shows? Like, could you see multiple different ballets?
I don't know. I only saw, I mean, we had these 2 nights kind of earmarked to go to the Vienna Opera House, and this happened to be what was playing.
Okay.
I don't know if there was like other ballets. Listen, I don't know anything about ballet. I'm sure there's like, there's kinds of ballet. And maybe if I had known the style of this, I would have known. So long story short, an hour, 45 minutes into it, of me.
Oh my God, how long was it?
Well, I'm going to get to that. Of me sitting with my hand under my chin because I'm like, and it's like, oh my God, I'm like completely squished in here. There was an intermission.
Did you guys leave after the intermission?
At which we left. We did leave. I think the whole thing was like 2 hours and 45 minutes. So
that's
like
a long time. Like
wait till we talk about the opera.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. But when we went, because you've started to like to go to Broadway when you come visit me. And
I love Broadway.
We saw the first time we went together, we went and saw Music Man,
awesome,
which was really good. It had an intermission.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went and I saw with a friend who was visiting Into the Woods, which also amazing. Sarah Bareilles was performing when we were there. So good. But then, okay, both of us had intermissions. And I will say, like, I kind of was like, okay, like, I'm kind of getting jumpy. Like, I could be done with this at both of those intermissions. But then you and I and someone else saw Come From Away.
Yeah.
Which didn't have an intermission, which was perfect.
It didn't matter because I was sobbing by the end of that one. Come From Away. That was so good.
It felt like it was like the pace was like good.
Yeah.
You didn't need an intermission.
Yeah. So the ballet, yes, it was long. So I didn't feel bad about leaving at intermission. I'm like, I have seen a lot of dancing. Like I have a lot of questions. Yeah. I've got some things to research. And then the other thing I forgot to tell you is this is a wonderful thing. The Vienna Opera House is amazing. It's beautiful, historic, but every single seat has a little, it's not like really an iPad, but it looks like a little iPad tablet at every seat. And it will translate what's happening in the ballet or the opera. You choose your language.
Cool.
So, I mean, it was like translating the ballet. Like, I also didn't realize there was like singers in the ballet, but they were like down in the orchestra pit. I have a lot I still need to learn. But when we went back for the opera, we were much more prepared. I researched it ahead of time while we were in Vienna. It was Lady Macbeth. It was like, I feel like it was like a Austrian or German take on Macbeth, but it was called Lady Macbeth. So it was like kind of the general story, but some differences. So
we kind of had some things to pull from.
we read the whole story before going in. We
read all of Macbeth.
No, we read the summary of like each part.
We read the cliff notes.
The cliff notes. Hey, listen. And then I followed along on the tablet during the opera. So I knew what was happening. And that was actually, the opera was wonderful. So it was, and then I knew a little bit more. We had totally different seats. It wasn't that I chose, I had booked all the tickets ahead of time. It happened to be for the opera, we were sitting on the main floor level. And we actually were at seats where I didn't even know it, but there was like an aisle in between us and like the seats in front of us. So we had plenty of room to stretch our legs, and we still had the tablet. So I could follow along, and they were good seats. And I also figured out that, because I kind of saw this happening during the ballet, and I was like, how does this happen? Is when you leave, you pre-order if you want to have like water, or you want to have a glass of wine, or you want to have a little treat at intermission. You can go on and do that, and they'll have it like ready for you at like a little table during intermission. So you can.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. So
it's like those fancy movie theaters in America.
I kind of, well, they bring your food to your seat. That'd be terrible over there. They would never do that. But so we had our little bite and then we went back in and we actually stayed for the whole thing. It was excellent. It was 3 hours and 15 minutes long. The
Wow.
only thing I'll say about the opera is it started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and the ballet started at 7 o'clock at night.
I don't know which, well, because I guess you went to dinner after
We went to dinner
the
after
opera.
the opera. We went to dinner before the ballet. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is going to sound so uncultured of me, but do they speak German in Austria?
In Austria, yes, they speak German. They also speak some French. I mean, they speak, but the main language is German.
Okay, so when I was in Paris recently, and everyone speaks for the
I
most part
know
English,
English.
which makes
Yeah,
you just feel so just
stupid.
stupid.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like Austria is maybe less of a commercialized
Yes.
destination. Did people speak English, or was it much more you trying to just like,
I would say they spoke more broken English. I mean, yes, a lot of people spoke English, like at the hotels and stuff. But the biggest plug, I'll make a huge plug for Vienna. It was one of my most favorite spots. And I will say, I mean, Paris is Paris. It's its own thing. People are going to feel the way they feel about it. I mean,
did you not like Paris?
no, I loved it. But it was getting crowded. But it's also, Paris is very like elevated. And it's like, here's my comment about Paris is like, is nobody in France overweight? Because honestly, all I saw there was like thin people. Now, half of them were smoking, so maybe that was part of it. But even the men, I'm like, everybody here is so darn thin.
Well, because they do so much walking and they're
I
eating.
guess.
And I will say, like, the thing I took away from my most, I'd been to Paris for the day with you, and we'd done London in that trip. And then I think my only other European trip was we went to Barcelona for dad for work, and we got to go along when I was probably in eighth grade.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
And Zurich.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I've been to Europe a fair amount. Okay. But as an adult, this was like my first big trip back. And it was just so nice that like it was so leisurely. It's like you're gonna go and you're gonna go sit down and
Yes.
you're gonna
Yeah.
enjoy your food and have an espresso with your dessert and like all of that. Like it definitely, I am a very fast eater and I'm just like shoveling food.
Yeah. No, I know. No.
And so it's like I could see if that's your lifestyle, like I'd probably be thinner.
Well, no, I mean, and again, that's not a dig on Paris. I was like very impressed with these people. I will also say that I did not hold back. Like if there was a pastry I wanted to try, I tried.
No, you're
If
there,
they
you're
gave me that
eating.
little roll of butter, I'm like, I must put this on something. I love
Oh my God, like
the
with
tubes
the
of butter,
jams.
the jams, everything. And I was literally like, when we were flying back, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have gained 10 pounds. Guess
No,
what?
you
I
don't
did not
though,
gain a single pound.
because you walk and their
Because I was
food is just
walking.
better.
But the comment about Vienna, I absolutely loved it. And there's a couple of reasons why. Not crowded, bustling, but not crowded. And here's one example is it was 5 o'clock. We were walking back. It looked like it was actually going to start raining. And we were walking back to the hotel. I think we had dinner reservations later, maybe 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So we had gone and seen a bunch of stuff. We were walking back and I was like, oh, I really want to go into this museum, this Albertina museum. But we come up to it and I'm like, oh, it closes at 6. I'm like, let's just go in. If we want to come back tomorrow, we'll come back tomorrow. We'll buy another ticket. Ticket was not expensive. I would say it was like 20 euros or something. So we just wander into this museum an hour before it closes, especially after having trudged through the Louvre to see a couple of things with about a million other people.
You were trudging.
We were trudging, and it was actually it was hot that day. And it was like you were moving in mass in the Louvre, right? Everyone's kind of like going around.
Everyone's like, where is the Mona Lisa?
Oh my God.
Must see.
So we wandered to the Albertina. We almost had the Picasso.
Is this an art museum? What I don't know.
It's
what
an art museum.
Is.
And literally, we must have seen like 100 Picassos, just like hardly anybody else in the gallery. We have time to read everything.
I'm surprised you
around.
Recognized that it was Picasso.
I can read. And then we saw Chagall, Monet, like all of these very famous painters, all my friends. And we saw everything.
You've had such an awakening, because when we were in London, I remember we went into because a lot of the museums in London were free. We went into it must have been the National Gallery or something. And we were like, so it was like, we were looking for like Picasso or Monet, and there were all these other, it was like Rembrandt. I'm saying that right. And all of a sudden we're just like, no, I don't really know who that is. Like, keep going. Like, let's
No,
find
we
something.
actually enjoyed the Louvre. We enjoyed this museum because again, we were kind of like, stretching our wings a little bit. Maddie, the funniest thing about when you and I went to London was when we were literally taking pictures of each other in front of
we thought was the Big Ben.
Big Ben. It wasn't until we took all the pictures. I was like,
and we were like, it looks so different in real life. And then because
that clock looks really different than the Big Ben.
Well, what was it actually? It must have been like the Parliament building.
I don't know. But I think literally we turned around. I think we turned around and then we saw this huge, like it was it had some renovations happening to it. But anyways, but Vienna was wonderful. I really did like it. The other big thing about Vienna, which I think is why I liked it. And obviously I am a proud American. I love America. I live here.
I'm not always a proud American.
Really, well, I'm not either. Different podcast. But there were hardly, and I felt like it wasn't like we were tripping over Americans in Vienna. A lot of just like different people. It was great. Everywhere else, a lot of Americans, because we left Vienna, we went to Lake Como. Beautiful. I mean, Lake Como, I felt like, honestly, I was like, is this fake?
We're in White Lotus.
Yeah.
Which I have not watched, but I know you have.
But they weren't, that wasn't where they were in White Lotus, but it was just, But the thing about Lake Como is it literally felt fake. I was like, is this like a movie set? Is this really what this looks like? Yes, it is. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. We really,
you know what? I also feel like I haven't seen a lot of photos from this trip.
I feel like I sent a lot of photos. I'll send
maybe
you more.
Maybe I wasn't looking at them.
I also tried to not be on my phone as much. I did take some pictures, but I didn't feel like I'd take a picture of everything. But the thing about Lake Como is we were staying at like a resort on the lake, and we honestly kind of used that stop. It was a little bit more of like, we hung out at the resort. We went to the pool. It was more, we didn't do a lot of traveling around Lake Como for a lot of reasons that I won't get into. But Lake Como, if you don't like windy roads and you don't like boats, you should like one or
Did you know that going into it, or was that was that disappointing?
It wasn't disappointing. It just happened to be we weren't in a place really to do many boat trips or, windy roads. But we didn't feel like, again, I'm sure everybody who goes to Lake Como did 500 more things than I did, but I had an amazing time. So I don't care. I saw beautiful things and we hung out and the resort was great. But here's what I will say. Every person I saw there was an American. In fact,
like you were at an American resort.
Yes. I mean, it's an international resort. They don't actually have a lot of those in America. I mean, it was an international property.
But it was not, we're not a family that we like to know what we're getting.
Right. I didn't go to some little random hotel. Yeah. But even beyond that, we went up to Bellagio one day, which was like a 45-minute drive. It's a town. It's like
the resort in Las Vegas.
I know. Well, based on that, I guess. But up there, everybody was American. But the funniest thing about the resort, the property we were at, is like not only were they American, I swear to God, half of them were from Texas. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot get away from these people. But no, Lake Como was amazing. We had an incredible night in Milan. Now, interesting little piece of history we got involved in is while we were in Lake Como, the former president of Italy, Berlusconi, died. And so it happened to be the night we spent in Milan, our hotel was half a block from the Plaza Duomo, which is like the big cathedral there. The night we spent in Milan, they were having the state funeral for Berlusconi in that plaza. So
that's crazy.
It was, but it didn't really, certainly there were a lot more security around, a lot of, press, but it didn't really impact us.
Well, that's like when Drew and I were in Paris, and it must've been January, and they were having it was the start of all of the kind of strife about the laws. They were talking about changing with the retirement age and all of that. And we're like crossing the street we were going to go to the Louvre, and the Louvre's like in the plaza area, but there's a road that you can drive through. And we're like crossing the street, and there were some police, but like nothing. I mean, I was like, it's the Louvre. It's, they just have police here. And then I like looked and I'm like, Drew, it's so cute. There's a parade going on, and then like it starts to get closer and it's like clearly a protest. And I was like, okay, well, let's just like go get in line.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, so Milan was amazing. We did some shopping there, of course. Mm-hmm. And then, we ended the trip in Dublin. And I have to say, obviously we went there to see a friend. I loved Dublin. To me, Dublin was such a relaxed, more like, I don't it reminded me almost of like Portland or Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Very I don't know how to describe it, but we had a great
Did
time.
it feel more like London felt
Yes,
or
but not a
or
fancy London, more of just like a down to earth, like very accessible.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing is the day we were there, the friend that we were visiting wanted to take us to a couple places and show us things like the Book of Kells and the Guinness Factory. But as it turns
Mhm.
out, everything was like completely sold out. So we only got to walk by those places. We didn't even go in. But we had a great time. We had a great time. We saw our friend, his wife, his brother, and had a really great time there. And we actually ended up, that was our biggest walking day, was our last day, when we were out in the city with him and he was showing us around. We ended up walking 10 miles, over 20,000 steps that day. That was
I
kind of our
know.
biggest day.
I feel like when I was last in Europe, though, I mean, I walk so much living in Hoboken, working in the city. So I feel like it wasn't as, there are people and I was like reading the guides and it was like, plan your trip to Paris and all of that. And it was like, be prepared to like walk a ton. And I'm like, I'm prepared to walk a ton every day anyway.
Right.
So like
Yes.
I will like routinely hit if I'm running errands or I know I need to like go multiple places, like I'll hit like 15,000 steps.
Yeah. No,
But I
and
could see for a
that's
little
my big I know. That's my
Texan
takeaway.
like you who drives
Mhm.
their car everywhere. But no, I think you guys, it sounds like you had an amazing time. I
We
will
had an
go
amazing
back.
time. I wouldn't change anything that we did. I honestly wouldn't change anything.
But I guess, into the prep work, I guess you've gotten better. But like, were you nervous at all for like the flights? Like, cause I assume you had to take little planes in between like
They
Milan
weren't
and,
little. No, they were like regular. I mean, it'd be like if I took a plane from here to see you up in New York, a city area.
oh, really?
No, they
It
weren't little
wasn't,
planes at all.
oh, I
They were
didn't
just
know.
like regular jets. Now, I will say we boarded a lot of planes on the tarmac. Like
Yeah.
they take you out in a little bus and then you go up the stairs and all that. So, no, it was great. I ended up having a window seat, I think, on every plane. And I saw most of the because we did not take trains around Europe. Like we flew from Paris to Vienna. We flew from Vienna to Milan. We flew
Mhm.
obviously from Milan to Dublin. But we ended up having flights that the sky was really clear. Like I saw the French Alps. I literally saw the top of the Alps.
Oh,
I
that's
saw
pretty.
the countryside. I saw the entire English Channel. Like when we took off from Heathrow, I saw from, coastline to coastline, the English
Mhm.
Channel. It was beautiful. So I saw a lot of great things, even from the plane, which was
I
amazing.
prefer not to really look out the window on planes because it
Oh,
stresses
I
me
could look
out.
out the window the entire flight. I love it. I'm a big window
Oh
seat
my God, or
person.
like flying over the ocean at night. I'm like, dude, everyone close their window shade. I want to pretend I'm on like a train or something.
No, okay, for me the worst thing, and it didn't happen this flight, but flying back is a daytime flight. The thing I don't like, although I understand why it happens, is like you're at, like, let's say you're at 38,000 feet, you're over the middle of the North Atlantic, and then you look out
Okay,
your window.
Captain Katie.
Yeah, and then you look out your window and there's literally another jet next to you, and you're like,
Oh, I feel better about that because I'm like, if something happened, like someone would see it.
what do you think that plane's gonna do for you?
Like they're gonna, because it's not gonna be like that Malaysia flight where they're like, where did it go?
Well,
Someone's gonna
that's
know,
true, but
like
I mean, is it
it
gonna?
went
Yeah,
down. I don't know.
eventually.
I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
someone who I'm a recovering anxious flyer.
Well, I am too.
Um,
It's not like I love flying, like, oh, let me get on and just like go to sleep. But I mean, we
did
had
you sleep at
fairly,
all on the flights?
I slept a little bit going over. I did. I
Well,
did
that was an
actually,
overnight,
I
I
know, but I only
guess.
slept maybe about 3 hours. I don't sleep on planes well. And going
It's
back,
so hard
no.
in first class to lay down in your lay flat seat.
Stop.
Meanwhile, Drew and I were taking our overnight flight. We were in like row 40 and I was in the middle seat. And I was
Well, just
like,
so you know, the first class, which is what we got put in, we didn't buy that ticket. Not only do you have a lay flat seat, your seat actually also can turn so you can sit at your table. So Dad and I could like face each other, like
oh
while we
my
were eating
God,
our
get out
meals.
of here.
Just don't worry, we didn't. I mean, we have been married 30 years. We don't need to
You
face
were
our.
like, I need this quiet time.
I
Okay,
need quiet
that is
time.
something else though. So we're not a family that goes on like 2-week vacations. Like, I mean, maybe we have in the past, or we've gone to stay with family or something where it was more extended. But like, did you and Dad like I don't know, did you get like annoyed with each other any parts of the trip? Like,
Oh, no, we had a great time. I mean, but we're kind of like that. We spend a lot of time together right now since we're both kind of in our sabbatical year, as we've discussed before. So we
mhm.
spend all our time together anyways. Now, listen, our next trip, we have a 2-month driving road trip with the dogs. Now
We
that's going to
can't even
be,
like scratch the surface of
no,
that on
that's going
this
to be a lot of,
podcast.
but no, we don't have that problem. It's not like, oh, I need to
Or
do
not
something.
like that you were like getting in, but like I am someone who, and Drew is the same, that we both enjoy alone time. And sometimes it's hard when you're in a hotel room to feel like, oh, I'm decompressing.
No,
Or
no,
like
we don't have that issue. I mean,
maybe that's why you've been married 30 years.
that's probably why. But yeah, I mean, overall, I would say everything was it was the perfect balance of, you know, doing things. We had some, you know, fancy dinners. We had some casual dinners.
Mhm.
We saw some planned sites. We had some unplanned, you know, sites that we saw that were also amazing. It was
So
great.
when you were booking it and you were making your itinerary and all of that, did you really plan out every day? Like, okay, Tuesday we're gonna go here for breakfast and we're gonna go to the Louvre and we're gonna walk here, or did you just
No,
kind of like
no,
wake up and decide day of what you were gonna do?
a little bit more day of, but we always had a dinner reservation. Almost every night we had a dinner reservation made just
Well,
so
and
we,
sometimes you have to, because we went to a couple places and they were
oh,
like,
you
you don't
do.
have a reservation, like, and they weren't even fancy. They weren't like
Right,
Michelin
right.
star or
Well,
whatever, but they were just so popular.
right. And that bums me out because the one you recommended to us in Paris, you know, we ended up getting, I mean, we didn't get to Paris till like 9 hours after we were supposed to. We didn't get until like 10 o'clock at night. We are supposed to be there like early afternoon because of all the flight drama. So we missed the reservation we had made at Astaire,
Mm-hmm.
which is the place you recommended.
It
And
was
then
so
we
good.
couldn't get another one. And then they were closed one night we were there. So yeah, so we always had a reservation. I think most of them we kept. A few of them, I mean, like that one, something interfered. I think another one, something interfered with it. But we had the dinner reservations booked. I did get tickets to the Louvre in advance, and I got them probably 6 weeks in advance or even 2 months. And I still couldn't even get the time I thought I wanted. So they were booked up already. And then, of course, I did
Mm-hmm.
get the tickets to the ballet and the opera. Other than that, I don't think I did too much in advance, but some stuff didn't need, you know, a lot of it was walking around, seeing sights. I mean, we did go in that one museum in Vienna. Obviously, in Dublin, everything was booked, so we couldn't get in because I didn't really
Well, and
plan that stuff.
you were visiting a local, so
Yeah, yeah,
they knew what to
yeah,
take you to. But
yeah.
okay, well, I guess what are your all right, let's do what were your three favorite things you did or saw, and then what are your three tips for someone going to Europe right now in the summer?
Okay, favorite things. There was this really cool area in Paris. It was a shopping area, and I guess it was one store, but it was on like three different corners. It was called the Galleries Lafayette. I don't know if you went there, but it's like
I don't think
it's
so.
kind of like a department store, I guess. But they had like on one corner it was like a men's store, on the other corner was like I guess the women's store, and then there on the other corner it was like a food hall
Like
and stuff
a
like that.
Paris version of Macy's.
I guess kind of, but when you go into the quote unquote women's store,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, the building, the entire store is just like rings this huge atrium with this like unbelievable ceiling. It's like 7 floors. And then
Wow.
you can take the elevator, not a small one, by the way, to the top. And they have a rooftop deck. I don't want to call it a deck, but
Oh, does it
whatever.
have a restaurant on top of it?
Yes, it has a restaurant
Okay,
up
I
there.
did look into that restaurant, but we didn't end up
Oh my
going.
God. And then you can see everything in the city. It's beautiful. It has
Hmm.
this amazing views. So it's like the building is very striking and like the inside with like, it was huge, but then, I mean, even the floor space was huge, but keep in mind, it was just ringing this whole, it was all open in the middle. It
Hmm.
was very cool. So that was very cool. We got to go to a Catholic mass while we were there. That was really neat. And a couple of interesting things about that is it was first communion. So some kids were making their first communion at it, which was really
Cute.
cute. And then the funny thing that we saw, and I was like, geez, we got to embrace this in the US, is when they pass a collection basket, they were passing around two baskets. So the Catholic in me is like, oh, there's going to be a second collection. It wasn't a second collection. The two baskets come down. The first one is if you want to put like, you know, money in, paper money or coins or whatever in. The second one looks like a basket, but when you look in it, there's a little tablet and you can do tap to pay for your
Oh,
donation.
wait, that's so
That was so
fun.
cool. That was just very interesting. So that was cool. And then I will say, I mean, everything about Lake Como was amazing. I would say the art museum in Vienna, the Albertina,
Mhm.
totally awesome. Just because it was very accessible and we could really like read stuff and understand it. We felt like we just take our time and learn. But I mean, I could go on and on. I have a million favorite things. And
Okay, well,
then and
what
tips.
are your three tips? Yeah.
My three tips are, I mean, I'm just the type of traveler that you don't have to check everything off your list. Like just because everybody who goes to Paris sees XYZ, I mean, you don't necessarily, maybe you're not going to like that. I will say we got sucked into a couple of maybe restaurants that were like kind of, I mean, we went to this restaurant in Paris, Gigi's, with the small elevator. It's a
Hmm.
wonderful restaurant. I thought it was a little bit like, okay, it had a, you know, you could have a table that had a great view, but there was a lot of places in Paris that had a great view.
Hmm.
I don't know that that was worth the hype. And it was also very expensive. Paris was very expensive. Vienna was like 2/3 the cost of Paris. Everything was just cheaper there. So
But
I
I
think
think some of that's coming from where, well, you obviously were probably eating at nicer restaurants than Drew and I were, but I feel like we were not as surprised, maybe because we live, Hoboken, New York is more expensive than Dallas. But I remember like we went somewhere and obviously like the tax is different and whatever, but I remember being like, this is the all-in price. Like that felt pretty
yeah,
reasonable.
I mean, it wasn't that I thought Paris was so expensive. It's just like relatively Vienna was so much cheaper. Like everything comparable was less expensive.
Yeah,
So
that
I
makes
would
sense.
say that's number one. Number two is like I think that there's a lot of like, I don't know what the right word is. When people travel, there's a lot of like almost like travel peer pressure or travel shaming. You know, it's like people wear it like a badge of honor, like, oh, I just have a carry on, or I took trains everywhere, I stayed here. It's like, just you do you. Like when you travel, just
Hmm.
do it how you want to do it and don't worry about what anybody thinks. Right. So it's like, if you want to
You
spend,
fly first class,
you want
you
to
do
spend,
it.
stop. You want to spend your dollars in a certain way, but not in another way, then do that, right? And there's things, I mean, that were important to us that other people wouldn't want to spend money on. There's other things people spend money on. I'm like, I would, that's just not important to me. I don't need to do that,
Yeah.
right? I don't need to have someone drive me around Paris in a little like old fashioned car with like a, there was a lot of that, right? You take the little tours,
What?
the Viator tours or whatever.
I don't think I know
I don't
what that
know.
is.
And then my last tip is like, if you're going on a longer trip, I mean, this was a long trip for us. Like it was really good. The timing of Lake Como and the ability to kind of like decompress there and just it,
Hmm.
that was really important. You got to give yourself some rest. And some days we're like, we did one big thing and we're like, oh, let's just go back. Let's just go relax a little bit. Maybe, get a drink at the hotel bar and just chill out before we go out to dinner. Like that's okay. Like it's not a contest to see how
Yeah.
many sites you can see.
No, I agree. And I think when we were, traveling most recently, and even when we go places in the US and it's somewhere new for us, like it's like can be such a rabbit hole. And I love to research and like figure out what you're supposed to do when you go to every place. But it's also like it's okay to like go in without a plan. And I know Drew
Yes.
is listening to this and he's like, we don't go in without a plan anywhere. As we're going to Cape Cod this coming weekend. And for the 4th of July, this episode will come out at a later date. And then we're going to Napa. And I've already like planned out our itineraries for both of those. Like every meal has been allotted for and all of that. So
Well, I think
I'm
you
not
have
taking
to.
my own
Yeah.
advice, but
No,
I
and I
can see
think, but
that's
here's
nice.
the thing. I think you have to do some of that because unfortunately, that's what's happened now is everybody makes a reservation. So I think you have to have a plan. You cannot be afraid to scrap the plan. I mean, obviously, if
I
you
agree.
money in advance, if you bought tickets to something, probably go if you can, but you can't be afraid to pivot and be like, oh, you know what? I saw this really cute restaurant. We were walking by. I really want to try that instead of this reservation. No harm, no foul. Let me
Well,
cancel the reservation.
and I mean, maybe we'll do like an episode on social media and all of that because I feel like we're always hating on it, despite that we're like addicted to it. But we were just in for this past weekend. I had Juneteenth off, so it was a long weekend for me, and we went down to the Jersey Shore, which we're going to do a whole episode about, like my first time at the Jersey Shore and living in New
I
Jersey, all of
cannot
that,
wait.
which it will be hopefully really funny. But we went to Cape May, which was so lovely. Like, love it. Like, definitely want to go back. But we had not made reservations because we were like, we don't know, like, is it beach town vibes or like what we should be doing? And it was really stressful because some of the places we like, there's a little downtown. And so we were basically just going each stop and we'd see like, do we want to eat at this menu? Like all of that, whatever. And some of the places were like, oh, like we're reservation only, or there'd be such a long wait. And then you like get on Yelp and then there's like a million options and you're like, where should we try next? And so it did feel like, and like at one point we were so hungry, I was like, I'm paralyzed. Like, I don't know where to check next. Like, let's just find anywhere that we can eat.
Well, it is interesting you mentioned about social media because of course, I do look at social media. And obviously, I recently posted on my own personal accounts about this podcast, but I specifically didn't post anything about the trip. And I remember distinctly saying at one point to Dad, your dad, I was like, oh, I'm going to post like, a couple things about the trip, or I think it was on our actual anniversary, our actual day of our anniversary. We were in Lake Como. And then I actually later I said to him, I'm not going to post anything. Everybody who I want to know about what I'm doing already knows.
We'll hear about it on this podcast.
Yes, right, exactly. But I was like, well, I don't need to post this. That being said, it is funny now because so many people I feel like are in Europe that I'm looking, I'm like, there. Like I saw someone, they had the exact same picture with the Eiffel Tower in the background from Gigi's balcony that I have, So, I mean, you have visualizations as well.
Yeah. No, well, you guys had a truly amazing trip. We as your daughters are really glad that you treated yourself and you went and did something big. At 30 years is definitely not a small feat. Hopefully Drew and I will, in 29 and a quarter years be celebrating our 30th anniversary as well. But if you're enjoying this podcast, we've had a lot of fun recording it. We've really, my sisters obviously have their feedback. If you have feedback, let us know. But what we'd love is like wherever you're listening to this, if you could give us a 5-star review, if you think we're worth 5 stars or whatever you think we are worth, just give us any review. And what?
We're not desperate.
Reviews. Literally just whatever you think, let us know.
You can also check us out. You can check us out on Instagram. We're at The Millennial and the Mom. And I say that knowing that Maddie takes care of the Instagram and she does everything on there. And I did offer to help. I want everyone to know, but she's like, no, I really have a concept of how this is supposed to look. Well, so I've not been trusted.
You were writing the show notes and I was like, this does not sound fun and cool.
No. So okay. And with that, I guess this is over. This episode is over. I'm not writing fun and cool, but what can I say? I am.
But yeah, check us out next week. We'll be back with another episode. And Mom, I'm sure I will talk to you between now and then. You're probably going to call me after this and say that was mean what I just said.
No, my feelings aren't hurt at all. I mean, like I said, I'm not the millennial in this conversation. So
or any conversation.
Or that's true. Or any conversation. All right. Talk to you later, Maddie. Bye.
Okay. Bye, Mom.